This real-side experience would be a demonstration of an agreement tapline, the identifying of it, and I would suggest its subsequent removal. One of the most commonly shared agreements among humans at this time would have to be the 9-to-5 cabal work jobs. We are raised in a programmed, indoctrinated, fear-based social structure in which working for the control systems in order to survive is very much ingrained in an overall system of control forged from restricting creation ideas. The agreement to these systems, these ideas, will subsequently encumber individuals with the cause and effect consequences. The overall effect experience will compound as agreement to restriction continues lifetime after lifetime. The effects will reflect this compounded restriction and become more so a simulated creation in a demise. Everything in creation is restriction, in that it holds individuals to it. If agreements are established and maintained to any personal effect generating ideas, or agreement to established ideas that have manifested due to agreement that have effected them into existence in the simulator, and also the nature of the ideas agreed to will be or become very apparent, despite marketing front ploys that conceal the real effect such ideas are resulting in. That the World KONtrollers intend to destroy the planet would have all that they create be geared toward this goal, and so any system created by the controllers that is agreed to will not only have the systems formed and perpetuated, but bring about their real intentions that lurk behind the surface, the steady poisoning, polluting, and ruining of this world. The 9-to-5 cabal jobs certainly gears in the machine that are bringing about the destruction desires of the world-destroying reptilians. Agreement, then, to such ideas is a decision to remain in creation through the cause and effect of it, but specifically an agreement to the destruction of the planet, which then results in having to experience that which the individuals decide and agree with, an experience in a destroyed world that they helped to forge through the agreements that made it so. And so, my RealSide experience would begin. I would start off by applying to a job that was similar to one I once had here on the physical in this lifetime. Just a general shelf-replenishing shop assistant job. Interestingly, the first part of the experience would get to a certain point where I was about to begin my work, dressed in the uniform and placing my belongings in a locker, but then the scene would keep rewinding endlessly. And so, this first part repeated many times over, like a stuck record, a movie trapped in a very limited loop at a certain part in the film. This may well indicate how many times, perhaps, I had jobs of this nature in the past, similar enslaved positions, or throughout the myriad and endless dimensions and creational simulator experiences of my created personal self. A stuck record, an endless going around in circles, a very limited position that this particular agreement exemplified. How we have the full magnitude and endless possibility of positions within the creational simulators alone, never mind the real universes, and yet we choose to restrict and diminish our experience by agreements to ideas that have us so very limited with our positions, especially the boring drudgery of the 9 to 5 jobs, perhaps also suggesting something that my personal self didn't want to see. We are always the deciders of our experience, and we can decide to block certain insights and RealSide revelations if we so choose. If perhaps we are not ready to see what it is life and the guides wish to reveal to us, or maybe a tapline we are not ready to address and release. So a little reluctance, perhaps, to proceed. The personal self would not have known what would transpire, but the real awareness and self would. It is always the real self that decides everything, including the pace at which its process of true reality recognition rolls out, and indeed decides if and when it actually begins the journey in the first place. Where there is reluctance with possible tapline removal would indicate an emotional attachment component, but then most agreements and decisions are based on emotion, as the emotional self usually categorizes every agreement made as a like or a hate, with all the various nuances in between. An agreement that is to the personal self positively emotionally stimulating can be as hard to release as one where fear has caused its addition to the created consciousness. So I finally got beyond this stuck place in the experience, finally securing my belongings in my locker and closing the door. Seems I had a far older locker than everybody else that was present, and they remarked how I must have vast experience with this job and will be a great asset accordingly. I knew this was so, that I had indeed done this job seemingly before, but had no recollection of it. My personal self had concerns then that it would not perform to expectation. A further indication of how all our experiences are stored in our akashic causal memory body, but are unavailable to the personal self and its new mental mind every lifetime. But the unconscious tapline agreements that make up the created consciousness are still constantly creating our experience, motivations, routines and habits, as we step once again into a pre-programmed vehicle, and if we remain unaware and unconscious, we simply carry out the programs of the personal vehicle we had decided and constructed, almost like putting on a movie that we had created. We are resigned to watching it now. The only chance of not being subjected to it would be the connection to the real awareness and moving beyond the pre-programmed vehicle to decide to see and be something different. And so we still have to deal with the created movie we made, but at the same time we can explore beyond the boundaries of it. We can watch other movies at the same time, so that we can get more viewpoints for becoming more aware through. The scene would change now. It certainly was not the job I expected. Not a filling of shelves detail or anything of that nature. It seemed to be almost an Egyptian setting, or something from a more ancient time. The buildings were structured very much like sand-blasted, rudimentary huts, with larger and more impressive buildings towering above these. Everyone here was hard at work, labouring, dragging great stones this way and that, the air shimmering with the heat of this open and exposed to the elements place. Among the slave workers stood a far larger individual, at least twice the height of the average man. He looked very Egyptian, and in fact looked very much like an Egyptian mummified corpse. He wore elaborate and bejewelled, expensive attire that sat loosely and ill-fitting on his emaciated and skeletal form, his face gaunt, yet his staring eyes were full of malice and sharp intelligence. For yes, this was the slave master, and everyone here did his bidding, under fear of extreme reprisals. Any insurrection would be met with torture and maybe death.